I know where I'm starting today. Okay, there we go. And here we are for another roundtable episode. God, I love these roundtable episodes. I want to start today inspired by some of the events at our previous retreat about, I guess, the dangers of pleasure. And I think I'd like to discuss the moth and its relationship to the flame, because the moth does not understand that in seeking pleasure, it's actually pursuing death. It does not understand that. It gets so caught up in the experience of the joy of the heat that it will burn itself to death. And though that is not necessarily what happens to us, it kind of is. And what I mean, and this is the danger, especially when you're really cut off from your own ability to deal with your emotions. And so you're living in a very tiny, fragile box. And in that fragile box, you feel very, very little. And often you're medicated at this point, or you're on your way towards medication, but you're trying to feel less and less by thinking more and more. And you may not understand that that's what's happening, but that's exactly what's happening, because you're afraid to just feel what you're feeling. You don't have any faith in yourself. And so the entire vast ocean of potential emotion that you can have is fucking terrifying. And so you think your way one little bit at a time into a tiny little box where you feel secure, but you also feel like you're in a prison. And so all of a sudden you'll have an experience. Maybe it's on psychedelics, maybe it's at a party, maybe it's during sports, could be anything. But in that experience, the box disappears, even just a little bit, and you feel free and you feel awake and you feel like you're okay with the emotions that you're feeling. And it's awesome. It's the most amazing thing in the world. And then you start to chase it by committing to that thing, that path that you felt got you to it, rather than recognizing that the entire experience itself was just letting go of the box. It was never about achieving a certain state. It was about not needing to. It was about letting go of the need to. And so you start to chase it. And in chasing it, it becomes farther away. And then you start to feel farther from it. And it feels depressing. And it feels very disheartening, like you can't make it there. And so you try even harder. You try even harder. And you're rebuilding the box every step of the way, not recognizing that's why. This is, as Andrew said recently, we don't realize that the way out is the way in. We try to escape, we try to get to that pleasure, and in doing so, we actually get farther from it. So very much like the moth, we don't understand that pursuing the pleasure is what brings the pain. All right, but allowing ourselves to feel whatever pain we're feeling allows us to experience the pleasure of existence itself, because we're not resisting the experience. We're not resisting the feeling. Andrew.
Yeah. And so there's situations when it seems like everything falls apart, right? Like the box crumbles because we think the box is what we are. Like our perceptions, our opinions, our way we see ourselves is the box. So it's like we're in a box, but we are the box. And then something changes, maybe from pursuing something, or the box drops and then we all of a sudden feel free. And then to your point, we try and maintain that feeling, and then things happen. And then because there's a lack of faith in ourselves, like we don't think we can live without a box. And so there's the building back. There's like the desire to build the same box back again and put pieces together that are fucking destroyed, because you've seen that like the box isn't necessary, but like that box is all you know. And so the realization that you don't need a box, you're willing to let that go, but then realize like, oh, I can, have faith in myself too. And this is a component of being free of a box, or not having such a seriously thick box. And that will allow for a new perspectives of ourselves to open up. But if there's the avoidance of certain perspectives that come from that box dropping for whatever reason that it is, it's like there's going to be the striving for building back the same box. And like we will over time, we'll build that same sort of box up again until there's the opportunity to let it go. Because sometimes the shaking of the box, the shaking of the way we think things are, isn't always a comfortable shake. Like just seeing yourself in a different way doesn't mean it's going to be a good way, but whatever that initial shift is allows for the opportunity to let go of that entire perspective of yourself and the need to do so. But as you run back to trying to build that box back up, the familiar things are going to come back that are involved, because that box was a vast component of a lot of different perspectives and ways that you see yourself. And without that, you're free. But without that, like you need some faith in yourself. And so it's a willingness to find out what you're capable of, but not running back through, needing forgiveness or needing everything be, back to the way it was, because back to the way it was hell sense, even though it was a familiar hell. Jazz.
Yeah, the familiar hell that we cling to, the prison that we hold on to and box ourselves in, which brings me to a point that I wanted to make about the retreat, having an idea of the retreat, because the retreat tends to hold very compassionate and very loving people, but it's always providing you the opportunity to grow and learn from yourself. And so if you're coming in with the idea that you have learned everything that there is to learn and that there isn't anything more to learn, then you just stop paying attention to the experience you're having. And there's always something to learn. Like anytime I've had the thought, oh, I've made it, I have distrusted that thought because there's nowhere to get to, one. And B, because I have now stopped paying attention to what is happening. And and that's when I stop being on the ball, if there is any ball to be on, is the experience that is unfolding right now in front of me. And there's always something to learn and grow from. And the retreat is just that, and a potential experience for you to have where you are able to see more of yourself. And then it's on you to learn from it and grow from it. Yeah, so you're always holding all the power, all the cards are in your hands. All anyone can show you is that, yes, you do hold the cards and that you can play them any which way you want. But I think the tendency we have, especially initially, is fear, is like, oh, fuck, this is me as well. I have to run from this. But no, there are other options as well. There's an option to be like, oh, wow, there's so much more to me than I thought. And I can embrace this as well. And I can learn and grow from this as well. And I don't have to run from this. Or I can do a little bit of running as well and come back to it when I feel more comfortable. But there's nothing wrong with any of those experiences. And the idea that you could be doing something wrong is just going to get in the way of learning from the experience that is always unfolding. And so you don't need an idea of that prison where you think you're always doing something right. That's what the prison is, right? That you think you're always doing something right because you have an idea of who you are and how you need to act. But once you let go of the prison, then you are able to see in how many ways there are of acting, how many ways there are of behaving. And I'm not just talking about this. I'm talking about all of it. And so you're able to learn and grow from all of it. And yeah, once you're not chasing pleasure, once you don't have an idea of what a retreat experience is like, a pleasurable one, then you are able to truly take in everything from everyone, all perspectives of me, because I am seeing so much more of me than I ever have before. And it's all coming from my willingness to look at myself dead in the eyes and be like, I accept you. I accept you for all that you're showing me right now.
Yeah. And just continue doing that. But that's what happens. We've had people in the community, for example, express, I'm scared. I'm scared of these parts of myself because they're scary. But you have to accept there are scary parts of yourself. There are scary perceptions of yourself. They exist within you. There are also pleasurable perceptions of yourself, right? There are all kinds of perceptions of yourself. That's how much you are. But to fear any of them, is to fear yourself. And then you wonder, why don't I feel like I'm complete? Well, because you've segmented yourself off from the rest of you. How can you feel complete? There are whole rooms that you're not going into in your own house. And it's because you're afraid of who lives there, and it's just you. So open up the rooms, wander around, learn from everything within it. but it's only when you stop being afraid, and we all know this. Who hasn't been in their own house at night alone? All of a sudden you're like, oh, it's kind of creepy. It's the same fucking house. Like nothing's changed. Nothing has changed. The lights are just not on everywhere, and that's the whole thing. It's your imagination. And the same is true for your thoughts. I'm scared of these thoughts. It's like, or I'm scared of becoming this. It's like, what, the monster you've just created in your mind? Like you can just shortcut your way through. Like there's not some process. It's the same thing. You may as well be worried about ghosts. Amanda, hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm definitely reflecting on the most recent retreat and this conversation about forgiveness and forgiving others and forgiving yourself. And I love that you got that it was just said that, like the box you create, or I guess the path you take to that unpleasant moment is the path you have to take back. And I thought of a time where I got too drunk and I got overwhelmed and I did things that I was horrified by the next day. And that was hitting on my best friend's boyfriend in front of her. It's like, I was like, oh shit, that is definitely does not me on my best night for sure. But that was the path back to being friends, is acknowledging that the next day and saying like, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And it was just because I was jealous. It was just because I thought that I wanted what you had and I had to take what you actually had to have it, versus finding one of the 7 billion other motherfuckers out there and have a relationship with them, right? I couldn't pick from the other 7 billion. No, I got to pick the one that my best friend picked, right? It had to be that one. And it wasn't that, it's just that I saw myself in her, where we share a lot of traits. And when I was drunk, I was lonely and I was desperate and I was jealous. And I thought that option was the only available option. But acknowledging that the next day is how we were able to reconnect, and how I was able to acknowledge my fuck up and not pretend that I wish it never happened. Of course, a piece of me wished that it never happened, but it did. And what am I going to do with it now? Instead of seeing what I did as a problem, what my actions were an opportunity to connect deeper, to show a part of myself that maybe I wasn't proud of, but a part that was there, a part that if she wanted to be my friend, she's going to be friends with the whole package. My friend is not going to just be friends with the pleasant parts of me. You're unfortunately or fortunately, however you decide to see it, you're getting the whole experience of this, Amanda. And I can't give you a fraction of the experience. I give you all of it. You may not see all faces of that experience, but you're getting the whole experience regardless of what angle you come at it or what angle you see it as. And after acknowledging my mistake and acknowledging why I made that mistake, because I felt at the core was that I was incomplete, that I wasn't enough, and that I needed a boyfriend, I needed a relationship, I needed someone else to complete me, to fulfill me. And in the desperation of feeling incomplete, it was expressed through at that drunken night of going after what seemed like the missing piece. Right. And so it had really nothing to do with her, and it really had nothing to do with him either. It had everything to do with me feeling inadequate, me feeling incomplete, and me not acknowledging, not being honest about that. And because I wasn't willing to be honest about where I was trying to use someone else as a distraction. But just being honest about all of that, me and my best friend, we've been best friends for 20 years. And it's because we are constantly acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we would want to share and the parts that we almost wish weren't there but are. And so when I was experiencing what was happening over the retreat, that was coming back up because I saw that. I was like, damn, I remember that feeling. I remember feeling that desperate, that lonely. And it's such a shame because I actually have always been alone in the experience of Amanda experiencing Amanda. And so I will never shake that. And I don't need to, because there is no problem unless I create it. There is no problem unless I'm trying to find it and settle on there being a problem. Because as Jazz is just saying, there's nothing but opportunities to learn. Every time I encounter what seems like a problem, it's just an opportunity. And because I feel like I can't handle that opportunity, or I can't fully go through that opportunity, that insecurity disguises opportunities as problems. But that's all that's happening, is there are no actual problems. And I'm getting to call my bluff more and more. And I also get to see what it looks like from the outside when I see someone else who thinks that it's true, who thinks that they're not strong enough, that they couldn't handle something that seems challenging or difficult. It's like, it's not difficult, it's unfamiliar. And because it's unfamiliar, you think that you can't embrace it because it's uncertainty. But you can always embrace uncertainty, because that's all you've ever done. Anytime I've given myself answers or told myself, oh yeah, we've got this, that's an assumption. And we do, it's just that I don't need the pep talk to be able to handle something, right? Just like I don't need to tell myself I can't, I also don't need to tell myself I do. I can just go forward regardless of how I think it's going to turn out, because I don't know. I never know. But I am glad when I put myself on my knees, because it's only ever really me that humbles myself, because I tell myself that I understand or know or assume, and then I burst my bubble, because reality is like, oh, that's cute. Really, that's just me. And then I laugh, because I'm like, oh shit, we got caught up again. Well, that's all right. That's all right. We can learn from it. It's not that I have to always be on point, is that I always can be honest about where I am, regardless of my opinion of where I am. And when I can't, I'm so grateful that all of you get to be the reminder. And sometimes I'm not going to be happy about that reminder. I'll be like, you know what, fuck you. And then later I'll be like, damn, thank you. I needed it. I didn't like it at the time, but I needed somebody to burst my bubble. So thank you for doing the bursting. And but it's been really interesting thinking about self-forgiveness, and how there really is no self-forgiveness. It's just self-honesty, because as it was said, like, you never give yourself a pass, because you know what you do. It's just a matter of what's your opinion of what you do that you struggle with.
Absolutely.
Well,
Self-honesty is it. And I've said this so many times for so very long. Brutal self-honesty. Like, you're running from your own judgment. You may as well just come to terms, right? And in that, all of a sudden you can see what you're doing, because you're not just judging what you're doing, right? So yeah, the nice thing about having your bubble burst, and that's the thing, like, you see the value in it. It sucks at the time. Like, there have been so many times where somebody said something where it's like, you're being kind of a dick. Fuck you. Like, you don't know where I'm coming from. You don't understand. God, those 3 words, eh? You don't understand. Yeah, maybe we do, fucker. It's like, maybe we all have suffered. Maybe we all get it. What it's like to feel overwhelmed, what it's like to feel afraid, what it's like to feel like you're not enough. Like, maybe we've all gone through it to some degree. Maybe we do understand, but no, you don't understand, because that justifies me acting in an especially different dickish way. And so after the fact, you're like, wow, I'm really glad that guy said that. But that said, it's in hindsight, you recognize that you grew because of it, because of the challenge of that single honest statement. Right. And so you see the value in being honest with yourself, which is why it's worthwhile to burst other people's bubbles.
Yeah. That brutal self-honesty is oh man, it's vital. And Amanda, I resonate, because I've had experiences, and actually, an experience that fucking it's fucked how reflective reality is of ourself all the time. Because I actually had something along those lines, and just for a while, like, I used alcohol as a numbing of myself, an avoidance of myself, an avoidance of the subtle discomforts. And it was such a normalized thing that I didn't even think of it as a numbing agent, an avoidance of certain things that I didn't like in myself. And so I avoided the dealing with certain things, because it was a way to avoid certain things. And so, yeah, I've done some dumbass shit from it, but it stems from the initial, it's like, and it's such an interesting thing, because it starts out, because there's a point where you don't have the same awareness anymore. But it's still that initial decision to, I'm going to numb myself. I'm going to fucking roll the dice on my behavior, essentially, because I'm not willing to feel this discomfort right now. I'm going to avoid this discomfort right now. And so I don't want to feel it. And so there is an immediate rolling of the dice as that plays out. And if you're not willing to be self-honest, it'll stay there and deepen, in a sense, those sort of feelings, because then, especially with something like alcohol, it's like the back and the forth is insane. And like going through college, it's crazy how fucking normalized it is to either be, out drinking or hungover or not too badly hungover, and then like, sober for a day or two, and then, back to going out. And I know people who do it even more frequently than that, and just how reflective it is of patterns of avoidance, of facing yourself, of facing components of yourself, and the assumption that there's something wrong with certain things, as opposed to just a willingness to look at it. And, those distractions come in many ways, shapes, and forms. But if there's the avoidance of it and the lack of willingness to look at yourself and the behavior and see like, oh, I'm using this as an avoidance pattern, as a means of avoiding certain things in myself and about myself, and then there's going to be repercussions to that. And it's on both sides a focus on yourself. When you're focused on yourself, judging yourself in a certain way, feeling uncomfortable about a certain thing, it's like, and then alcohol comes into play, you can avoid it, or you can just be good with that discomfort that you're feeling and see it played out, as opposed to using something to avoid it or distract yourself from it. But then if you do choose to avoid it, there's going to be repercussions on the other end. And so, yeah, I mean, there was a specific experience that came up that I've straight up, been dealing with today, and reaching out to someone I should have reached out to a long time ago. And it's it's never fucking comfortable at all to do those things. But as we've been talking about, like that, those changes in yourself are always in potential. And there's a number of things that have been coming into play for me. And it's interesting how we maintain a specific perspective of ourselves, and it allows us to avoid certain perspectives so seamlessly. It's like we're fucking good at avoiding certain perspectives of ourselves, but it has opened up the doors to me and a number of things that have come up to be like, oh, I'm not a good person. That's not like, I'm fucking not. And no matter how much certain, and even just being seen in a certain way as a, quote unquote good person, it's like, that's fucking wrong. And so me maintaining this idea and perspective that, I could never possibly be a bad person or a selfish piece of shit or an asshole. And it's like, being willing, and as we were talking about on the social episode, like being willing to look at those perspectives without the judgment allows for the ability to then allow that change to keep playing out. Because it's like, no, because if I'm not the person that I'm starting to see that has more, considerations, then I'm the person that I've been, and I want to run back to that person. But that's what got you into the mess of seeing yourself in a certain ways, is the one that has continued to have the similar perspectives. But being willing to see yourself in that way is in fact an opportunity to see yourself differently. And then that comes with different varying considerations. And so it's not something like, when things change, when things go fucking sideways, to run back to trying to fix them, as opposed to just being that change moving forward, is a running back to the familiar perspective of yourself, the familiar story, as opposed to just being able to see like, oh yeah, that's a possibility. Then you're able to see that in other people as well, and you're not as fucking caught off guard by other people when you're not maintaining certain perspectives of what could and couldn't be possible, because you're willing to see that, oh, I have the potential to do that. And so therefore anyone could have the potential to do that. And there's more awareness that's in play. There's more sensitivity that's in play. There's more willingness to not look at just one side of the fucking spectrum that I've done my whole life, and being able to see both sides allows for more considerations and allows for more of a free experience, but it doesn't come without the willingness to look at the fucking uncomfortable sides that you realize, oh, I have the potential to be that, but it doesn't mean that I am that. It's just that it's in there, it's in potential, and it's not something that I have to run from, and that will allow the change to continue to play out.
Well, this is it, right? If you're not trying to be a good person, then you're not judging everybody else according to that standard, which makes you far more reasonable and empathetic, which is closer to being a good person than anything else. Marie, hi. Glad you could join us.
Hey, glad to be here. It's really interesting hearing everybody talk about being in a box when like we're all sitting here looking at ourselves in a box. And it's funny because all I can see are very limited perceptions of all of these boxes. And it's like, that's kind of how everybody sees you. It's like, this is very limited idea, this very like isolated, not the full picture view. And like, we don't, and it's like, it feels like this process has been trying to see the whole picture instead of thinking that I'm also this limited idea. Did Amanda just collapse from laughter? I hope in a good way. Yes. I just this is wonderful. I just feel like it's such a interesting dynamic that's happening that like here we are sitting all in our boxes, and all people that are watching or that are even in this call can see us in these boxes. And that's kind of how people will hold you. And like, that's never true though of what you are, because you kind of hold yourself into a little box. It's about like undoing that box and recognizing there is no box. And that makes me think of, I've been loving that forgiving is coming up, because that's something I usually hesitate to talk about, because people will resort to the like definition of forgiving, which is often how I was taught growing up, of like, yeah, you can like overlook what somebody has done to you, but you still like, hold a little bit of a grudge. Like, I'm still a little bit better that you like, you did this to me. I forgive you, but I'll remember that, and I'll treat you a little bit differently probably, but like act like I'm forgiving you and moving on from it. I'll maintain a relationship with you, but whatever that means. But like what I've started to learn and understand what forgiveness actually is recognizing this isn't another person or another thing that's attacking me, making me a victim, doing this to me. This is me. It all is me. So why would I have any type of, like, why take it personally for sure? Like, because this whole experience is just you. So who am I getting angry at, or who am I judging? Who am I, and then that makes me think of the reflection, because if it's all you, then of course the experience that we're having seems to match up with our thoughts and our fears, or like all these things that seem to just pop up. But it's not just like for a random reason. It's like, this is all you experiencing yourself. And this is how it's playing out right now.
Yeah, exactly. And oh man, that idea that it's that even the looking at other people to like see how they're doing or see how they're handling, and comparing yourself both, because we can compare ourselves to feel worse about ourselves, but we can compare ourselves to feel better about ourselves, or just to validate certain behavior. And you hear that a lot with like religion, it's like, oh, there's a billion people who practice Catholicism, like they can't all be wrong. It's like, yeah, like they can all be afraid. And so if you're relying upon anyone else to see what they're doing or how they're doing, it's like chipping away, cutting down on the honesty that you have with yourself, and the ability to look at yourself from certain perspectives with that brutal honesty. Because if you're looking to someone else, and most people are self-absorbed, afraid, worried, then that comparison is going to be relative to that, and that's not freedom. And so it has to be a willingness to just look at yourself and your behavior for what it is, because we can see that the most clearly. Like, we don't even see other people as clearly as we think that we do, especially when we're not willing to look at ourselves. And so how could we compare ourselves to someone else where we don't exactly see, even with clarity, what's going on with them, and then compare ourselves to them when we have a very specific point of view of ourselves? And so that brutal honesty doesn't come with any degree of comparison. It's just a willingness to look at yourself and your behavior and how you're seeing things and what you're doing and your own actions on your own in silo, without the consideration of how it measures up or matches up. Because then from the insecure side, it's like most of our insecurities are in comparison too. Like, I'm not good enough. I don't do this well enough. I don't. And that comes from comparative mentality as well. Like, it's just you going through things, dealing with things. There's nothing. And without so much comparison, there isn't so much insecurity left as well, because that stems from some made up bar that you have based on perceptions of how other people do things. So if you're relying on it to feel better, and then then there's going to be inevitably the comparison to those experiences on both ends of comparison is at play. It's like, oh, well, this person doesn't do this as well, or this person's still dealing with this, and I've overcome this, so I feel better. And it's like, but this person does this better than me, so I feel worse. And it's like this, but this person I'm better, but this person I'm worse. And it's like this fucking crazy ass back and forth, but they go hand in hand, as opposed to just sitting with ourselves and being willing to look at ourselves and both be willing to have that brutal honesty and willingness to just be what we are, without this pull to be something else. Because if we're pulling to be something else, we're not looking at ourselves honestly, because we're trying to be something else. And so we're avoiding that. And so that those kind of go hand in hand as well. Marie, or you just look at your hand up, or Ben?
No, it's just, I wanted to say that it helps, like, when you understand that some decisions were made from like fear or fear driven, and so then, like, you can relate to it, like you were saying before. Like, it's not much like, oh, this person's a bad person because they did this thing. It'd be like, well, we don't know where they were at. We don't know at all, like the fear or whatever has driven them to act in that way. And so there's always like potential to look at it from that way, instead of holding on to, because then we're just, once again, holding on to identities or these labels that can't define who we are. We are the whole spectrum. We're all of it. And so there is going to be some, like, maybe not pretty stuff, but like, that's because it's all in there. And when you're more willing to accept your icky stuff, then you won't like start pointing fingers at other people's stuff. And it's just like, hey man, we all got our stuff. It's okay. Like, it isn't who we are entirely. Is where we were at that time, and that's okay. And where we're at now is maybe different or it's the same, but regardless, it's still, you're still just the moment. You're still like, can't be a moment in the past. You can't be anything that you're holding. Like, I don't know. It's just, it can't be all of you. So
Yeah, exactly. And the moment comes with every perspective. So sometimes we'll even use, oh, I'm just the moment. I'm just what, as a means of avoidance of certain aspects of ourselves that we don't like as much. So it's both the willingness to be where you're at without the diminishing of all of the potential perspectives, because sometimes we use that and as an avoidance of looking at, certain experiences or certain things that we've been through, as opposed to looking at them for what they are, always in potential as a way that we could possibly act in response to something based on, both how much fear we're embodying and how much faith in ourselves that we have.
Ben.
I froze.
Hey, hey everyone. Hey stream viewers and listeners. I just wanted to maybe first touch on the awesomeness of this current conversation. Because so we're like 40 minutes in and now I'm starting to talk. So, but like what I've observed in the last 40 minutes is just a roller coaster, pretty much. Everyone's talking about, I don't like whatever Andrew and Amanda were talking about in the beginning. I was kind of getting emotional, to be honest. Just being in the presence of their authenticity. And then just coming up to the mime moment when we were all pushing out our little boxes and just laughing, like what an amazing emotional roller coaster. And it's because it's all coming from authenticity. Like I can just feel like every word that comes out of everyone's mouth is not distorted by the lens of ego. Like you guys are just being yourself. And because of that, I can be myself. And it's like opening, I think of like the Panama Canal, where it's like all the locks have to like do their thing, fill the water for the ships to get through. And I have been kind of away from this conversation for an extended period of time. So this is my first time coming back to it. And when I am not here, I feel like the locks are kind of having trouble coordinating with themselves, and like the ships, they're getting through, but it's taking a while. But when I'm in this conversation with people who aren't as swayed by distortion, I feel like the locks are working perfectly and the ships are getting through just fine. And so I really felt that when I was listening to everyone up until now. And to go on maybe the theme is boxes today, because I want to add my thing about boxes. So yeah, I think it's a habit to put things in a box. Like I think of my first shroom trip, and I experienced ego death, and then I experienced coming back into my story. And that was like the first time that ever happened. And then after that, I always like thought back on it. I was like, what was that? How do I get back to that? And what I did was use my habit of conceptualizing things and experiences. And unknowingly, I conceptualized my first shroom trip. So that's a habit. And to expand more on the habits, I had like a profound realization, insight, I guess, a couple weeks ago, where I was sick I guess. And again, sick is just a label. But the second I started feeling that sickness, I immediately went back to the story. I was like, man, I just, I want to be healthy again. I had this idea of what it means to be healthy. And that was the time before I started feeling sick. So I went a few days into this. I'm a few days into this sickness, and I'm in between, like, okay, accept that you don't feel good. And then also, but you kind of want to be healthy again. So I'm just in this like in between state. And then I decide to go outside and just be barefoot in the grass and do my slacklining because I wanted to move. And I heard that, when you're sweating or when you're moving, when you're sick, it's like a good way to help heal, because detox, I don't know, movement is medicine, that stuff. But so I'm like slacklining, and I start thinking like, I think it's a habit to have this idea of health and want to go back to it, because I may never feel that way again, because that feeling that I had was in the past. So if I never feel that way again, then the only way I can feel is how I feel now. And then I thought of the etymology of health, which is to be whole. And so if I don't have this idea to go back to, then I'm just here and I'm whole and then I'm healthy. And then it fucking just, I went through like I just felt so much better immediately. And it felt like the whole feeling better versus getting better. I felt better, but I felt like I also got better, because I realized that there is no way that I can ever get back to that feeling of health that I had in my mind, because the only thing I can feel is how I feel right now. And to let go of everything else and just be as involved as I can right now, then that is health. So, yeah, leave it at that for now.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's interesting that the perspective on health and just how things play out with that, right? Like you're feeling a certain way and then fighting it, thinking you should be different. And that's kind of with everything, this assumption that, I should be healthy and I shouldn't be sick. It's like just another assumption that kind of keeps the sickness around. Like I should be this type of person, I shouldn't be that type of person. It's like these assumptions about who or what I am, as opposed to just seeing that every experience has the opportunity to be what it is, and feeling a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that you have to act in a certain way. And so if you're sick, you don't have to resist and fight the sickness or try and get out of it. To the same way that if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to run back to trying to feel comfortable again or fighting that experience, as opposed to just sitting in it and being in it. And then that allows things to unravel. But if you have this idea that you should also always be feeling a certain way, always be feeling, 100%, there's going to be a missing out on certain experiences or certain, willingness to see things in certain ways based on a varied experience that isn't always, the feeling perfect all the time. And with discomforts and insecurities are the same thing. Like the idea, oh, I shouldn't be insecure, I shouldn't be acting this way, I shouldn't be blah, 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 whatever we come up with, is just another way that we avoid that experience that there isn't anything wrong with necessarily. It's just our assumption that there's something wrong with that. Just like the assumption that, it's a bad thing to be sick, as opposed to just another variation of our experience. And when we see it as that, usually it has a way of playing out in a different way, or at least there's still the ability to, fully experience what you're going through as you're experiencing that thing that you've typically tried to run from or avoid.
And we've said it before, like being afraid of getting sick is just going to make it harder for your immune system, right? And stress just locks down everything in terms of the healing process. And so you're actually working against yourself in your struggle for self-improvement. and healing. Like there are people who have exercised themselves to death, for example, right? People who've gotten so caught up in losing weight that they've actually hurt themselves physically, right? So there is a certain degree of just self-acceptance and intuition and being able to feel your body. This is something, the older I get, the more I recognize that I really didn't spend much time just feeling my body. I thought I did for sure, but I wasn't really slowing down enough to do so. There are times now where I'll just lie on the floor for a good half hour and just feel my body. Like, where's my tension? Where am I more relaxed than others? Where's the blood flowing? Are my feet cold? Things like that. And just feel it without doing a thing. And how often do we give our body even that much? That's the basis for Reiki or energy healing or hands-on therapy or any of that stuff. Is just the fact that you're just providing more energy. You're just providing more potential for somebody to do more with their own body. But we're not giving that to ourselves. We're not even giving our whole attention to ourselves. And yet we're wondering why we're not healthier. It's because we're not whole in ourselves. We're focused on trying to be more all the time. So yeah, it's a great subject to bring up. It's good to see you again, Ben.
Thank you. You guys as well.
Jay, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Thanks. I'm glad you guys are back. Good to see everybody again. Hey, Jazz. Amanda, great to see everybody. Ben, Marie, Andrew, good to see you all. I wanted to touch on what we were talking about. I missed the first part of it, but I can imagine what was talked about because there's been, communication going on and whatnot. And so in regards to like things like that, like Andrew mentioned something about brutal honesty. You mentioned about being brutal honesty with oneself, and I can relate because I came from a background in my past where I was kind of a druggie, and being a druggie, I did a lot of druggy things. And unfortunately, when you do a lot of druggy things, a lot of people get hurt in that wake, including myself, and I beat myself up. There's processes, and this has gone on for years and years and years. But it was because I was afraid to face the fact of the moment right now. And I needed, or felt like I needed, some kind of a drug to escape the moment that I was in. And so I had to overcome that, and I had to get brutally honest with that. And coming to terms with that, like a lot of there was repercussions, there was consequences, and there was a lot of real conversations that were tough with people that I cared a lot about, that loved me, cared a great deal about me, that I hurt, that I fucked over in some kind of way. And I had to forgive myself, first of all, and say, hey, you know what? First of all, I'm just not going to do that shit again. And then secondly, I had to just be honest with them and say, hey, I know that I fucked up. I did. And this is how I think I fucked up. This is the way that I feel like I fucked you over somehow. And I just want to let you know, I appreciate that you might not even give a fuck about it at all, but I'm just letting you know I'm aware of it, and that shit ain't gonna happen anymore. And then that is it, and that from there, it makes things a whole lot easier, But I have to be first willing to just face that shit. And what else you gonna do? Hide away? That's my other choice, is to keep on hiding away, and that's with the drugs and stuff like that. That seemed like an easy road until I almost died a few times, and that became apparent that that's really not the way to go, and there are other options. But now things are changing, and I can relate from that aspect too, because I've been down that road. I've felt, and I've been the one that fucked up bad a lot of times, and I had to accept that, and I did. And it's just coming to fully terms with it yourself, and then you get through it, man. And then you can change, become anything you choose to be in this moment forward. You've got to face the past too while you do, but you do, and you get through it, man. And now shit, when I don't even think about it, like I'm not that person that I used to be by any means, nor would I be. Of course I'm different, and my life is much different than it was 15 years ago, say. But now I don't even have to think much, and it's all about the application. You've been mentioning that a lot in recent episodes, right? It's like not about the words, it's about the application. And so it's been kind of eating at me a little bit because there's some things I'd been putting off that I wanted to do. So I just said, fuck it one day and did it. And I said, you know what, no matter what comes of it, I already made the choice. So any future thought about that is not going to fucking help a thing. So I cut out, it's been 5 days now, but no nicotine, no alcohol, just, and it's been the easiest 5 days of my fucking entire life. It's so easy. Like, I don't know what the fuck I was building it up to be. I was all afraid that I was going to be, oh, you're being uncomfortable. Like a little wimpy bitch. And like, now that I'm doing it, and like when the thought comes, the craving comes, it's like, it holds no weight because I'm not going to act on it. I don't have to give that any more consideration than I do any other little fleeting thought that I might have. And, you know, it's fucking easy. And that's coming along, and not to compare or contrast or anything like that, but just to show that you can come a long fucking way in this life, you know? And it just comes to with being honest. I've got to agree. Like it's really what it comes down to, is just being 100%, just face that shit. Like, what's the worst that's going to be happening? You know, you're not going to physically hurt from facing your shit, you know, just fucking do it.
Absolutely. Fuck. Well said, man. Absolutely. And this is it. It's growth, it's maturity. And this is something that we reflected on over the weekend, that, you know, there's a developmental path, and ideally we have parents who they can take it in terms of their own needs and whatnot when we as their children aren't happy with them. And when there's a consequence to our actions, when we've pushed them too far, when we've been inconsiderate, when we've lacked empathy, you know, these parents, maybe if in an ideal situation, would be like, no, you can't do that. Like, that's just not how that works. You know, people aren't going to put up with your shit. And you could whine, you could cry, you could throw a fit, and they're still going to sit there and go, yeah, it still doesn't change anything. Doesn't change a thing. Doesn't change a fucking thing. You know, and as in doing so, you mature a bit, you grow up, and you don't grow up to still try and enact that same fucking strategy of, I just need to throw a big enough tantrum. I just need to throw a big enough catastrophe in order for people to pay attention to me, for me to get that pity, for me to get that attention. I can actually just deal with my shit and grow up on my own. It's on me. It's on me. And that's responsibility. That's what we're supposed to learn over time. And I know this as a parent, because I'll say it, I've said it before, I'll say it again for sure. The hardest part of being a parent were other parents. Because it is super difficult to see some kid who is out there being a bully, some kid who is out there throwing a tantrum, some kid who is doing, and then you look at their parents and they're modeling that behavior. Maybe not to the same extreme, but it's there. The kid just hasn't learned how to limit it to a reasonable, societally acceptable level. But that parent is still greedy. They still force their way through a conversation. They still, you know, impose their perspectives on you. They judge you. They do all that insecure shit. And those people raising a kid, if that child's not like, you're the best parent, you know, let me buy you something. Let me distract you. Let me make you feel better. You know, let me soothe that for you. Insecurity in a parent is just, it's almost like doom for the kid. Like, it's really hard, because a parent should be a model of what an adult is. And an adult is self-responsible. But how often do we become parents without being responsible? How often do we become parents as a product of irresponsibility? Right. And so our children are unfortunately caught up in that mess, not learning these very valuable lessons. And instead, they grow up, they throw a temper tantrum. Now they're too old to justify it as just being a child. Now it's something that's wrong with them. Well, let's medicate that. They're not able to handle their own emotions. They're not able to handle their own reactions. So we've got to numb them down. We've got to make it so that there's less that they feel, so they don't have to react so harshly. And then when they are in a situation where they feel all that shit, they're just right back where they were as an infant, awash of everything it is to be human, with no skill, just some strategies to try and feel better in the short term. And that's why it's so important for us to be self-honest about that. You know, I'm just chasing happiness. I'm just chasing happiness because I'm afraid, you know, things like that. Like, that's all it is. To be able to just accept that you are chasing happiness and you're willing to blind yourself to everyone else to get it, changes everything. But unless you're willing to look at it, you're just going to keep doing it. Right? So it really is self-honesty all the time.
Oh, man, even that realization, like, I don't need to be happy. Like, I'm good not being happy. Like, I'm okay not being happy. Like, ooh, that's a big one. right there. Like that, like, oh man, because every discomfort that we go through, it's like it can be this shouldn't be happening because this is what should be happening. And so there's so many strategies to avoid the experience of not being happy, being uncomfortable, whatever it may be in whatever sense. But if you're willing to see that, oh, I don't have to have that or be that or feel that way, then there's more willingness to just be where you're at and take the actions, appropriate actions, because there isn't this idea of, oh, I should be happy though. That's what it's all about. Life's about being happy. Like that's something that's like running around society all the time. Like life's about being happy. So then immediately, if you're not, you think something's wrong, something should be changed. But a lot of our experiences, a lot of our most impactful experiences where we grow the most, we're not feeling happy. We're not feeling amazing, incredible 100%, be it discomfort, be it insecurity, be it sickness, be it anything. Like those are the deepest opportunities for growth. But if there's the assumption that I should be happy, I should feel better than I do right now, there's going to be the avoidance of whatever there is in order to replace it with the striving to be happy in whatever way that you use in that spot. But the realization that there's nothing saying that I should be happy or should be comfortable at any given moment, like that opens the doors to every experience. Like every experience is back on the table because there isn't going to be the avoidance of certain ones because there's the assumption that there's only one way you should ever feel in life. And as much as you can realize that, it's like there's certain points where you're like, oh, that was an assumption I was making, but it changes the game when it's not all there is anymore.
Well said. Jazz.
Yeah, something I've been processing as well since the retreat is how I can just be having a great fucking time as well, despite what is happening. Like there was a lot that happened this retreat, and something I've been processing is how I didn't have to be as resistant to it as I was. Like there was some resistance to it, and yeah, I don't have to hold on to that resistance. And this idea that I can do anything just because I want to, because I can do anything that I want to, but also if there isn't as much resistance to something that I'm feeling, then I may also just want to do something different. And that's okay too. Like allowing myself to feel all that it is that I'm feeling allows me to go into a different direction than I would have wanted to. But something that I learned from from my experience with the way that I did deal with things was how much responsibility and awareness and power you have over your experience in the moment, because you could be going through something and dealing with it and allowing the intelligence to play out as it were. Because I felt like I was so appreciative of how we were dealing with everything that happened at the retreat. It was honestly incredible to see, and I learned so much from it, and I'm sure I'm going to continue to learn from whatever happened. But it also showed me how I can still laugh more than I've ever laughed, honestly. Like pretty sure I have a six-pack now from how much we laughed, because of just how much we were willing to relax into the uncertainty that we were feeling, all the emotions that we were feeling. And because we knew that it wasn't about the conversation and it wasn't about trying to make anyone anything, including ourselves, and we were allowing ourselves to just be however we were in every moment, we were so allowing ourselves to just play with each other and have just a bunch of fucking fun. And something I realized towards the end of the retreat was how, and this is by the way while everything was happening, which was just how much we were able to enjoy the stories that we were telling ourselves. Like we were building. So while we know the stories aren't real, there's no truth, there's no certainty to what is happening. I was also enjoying just the play we were able to do with the stories that we were making up. Like we will see a golf hole night right by a house that someone has, and we can just start making whole story, spin a whole story around it about how we can have these people who are looking at the golf hole, and we will ask them, "Oh, fuck, you wanna shoot a golf ball into this?" And then everyone's just like gathering around, and we have a whole line going around the blocks that are super long about how that are just wanting to get in on the ride, get in on the fun of playing with the golf ball. And so this was just a story that was contributed to by everyone who was part of the conversation. And we were just flowing free, having a great fucking time, using humor, and just letting go, letting the experience be the experience, regardless of whatever we might think the experience needs to be, like a happy one or an insightful one. Like, doesn't need to be anything like that. I don't have to be intelligent. I don't have to be whatever I think I have to be. I just have to be me in every moment. And there's so much freedom in that, because then I can truly just listen to what is being said without feeling like I need to have something to say, because I don't even know what's going to come out later. So let's just listen, and not even try to listen, because that's something I learned so much at the last day of the retreat, the last night of the retreat, was how much I was forcing the action of listening. Like, oh, I have to pay attention so I can respond. But no, I don't. And once I realized that, oh my God, was the ball just rolled down a fucking hill. And I was just, I don't know, I was hearing multiple people at the same time, and I'm not sure how my brain was processing it, but it was happening, and the words were coming out, and they still are. And it's still coming from me. Like, after me has processed whatever me just said through this call, me is talking now, saying whatever it's saying now. And that's intelligence at play. And it was so beautiful to see that at the retreat. Honestly, I'm so appreciative of the experience I just had, because it was so relaxing to just see that at play, like the fun, the play, the intelligence, the creativity, the acceptance, the compassion, the patience, the acceptance, all of it, because we were settling into what the experience is, rather than talking about enlightenment, talking about what the experience can be, talking about what freedom looks like. Not talking about what freedom looks like, but just embodying that freedom. And I'm just so happy about that, you know.
Yeah. Well, this is it. Like, it's really easy when you're dealing with things that you don't necessarily like or understand to want to push them away. Right. Like, I don't like this. It shouldn't be happening. And often with people, especially if they're being selfish, it's like, just get the hell away from me. But we do it out of defense more than anything else. We do it out of fear. We're like, I don't know if I can deal with this, and with somebody who is being extremely selfish, right? It can be very easy to just get lost and like, oh, why does this person have to do this? And I wanted to have my own kind of weekend, which is selfish in its own response, right? And you're like, well, what about me? And you're not looking at the fact that this person is a part of the entire experience. There is something to be learned from this, as well as an opportunity for them to shine, as well as an opportunity, for many opportunities in some case, for that person to turn it around and inspire everyone else in doing so. But in not doing so, everyone else is inspired by their own ability to deal with what just happened, right? And so it's not about our preference about the situation. It's about accepting the situation, allowing ourselves to be changed by it, allowing ourselves to see ourselves in everyone involved in it, which is removing that idea of compassion and just allowing yourself to process the situation. But as soon as it's personal, it's no longer what it is, which means that you can't deal with it as such. And it distorts everything, including what everybody gets from it. So it has to remain impersonal. It has to be just what it is. It's not about whether or not I like it. It's what's happening, right? And then with that, you find other ways to work with it. You find other opportunities, but it's removing that response, that rejection of, this isn't what I'd prefer.
Oh man, like that assumption that something shouldn't be happening, and someone having that situation play out for themselves, not seeing it as something that, like, at this retreat, there were certain things I think everyone learned from, because everyone could see themselves to some degree in a certain situation. And so to even think of it as, as much as, uncomfortable, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing necessarily, but like what I'm trying to say is, like, there was an opportunity, everyone took something from it. And so there isn't the need to make this assumption that it shouldn't have been done, but like if you do, then you're not willing to look at it for what it is. Like you and yourself, if you think it shouldn't have happened, like aren't willing to see it for what it is, as opposed to being willing to see it for what it is, being willing to see it as, oh, this is something that I can possibly do. Because then everyone else saw it and translated it in their own sort of way, saw it through their own experiences. And so there was a massive benefit to that from some degree. Like there's always that in potential. And so, especially coming in it as someone else seeing the situation, thinking like, yeah, like this shouldn't be happening. Oh, I wish this wasn't happening. It's like, your opinion of it is fucking irrelevant, no matter what you're going through, whether it's an external experience or a internal experience, because then you're actually willing to see it for what it is. Because like every single time, like it is what's happening. This is what's happening. Like this is what's going on right now. You thinking that it shouldn't be going on is so irrelevant. It's beyond irrelevant to how, like, it's literally all that is going on is what is going on, So, but being willing to look at it and not run back to the familiar way of looking at it, or of judging yourself for doing it, or of seeing yourself in a certain way and making the assumption that even with not necessarily the situation I've been referencing, but with internal experiences in and of ourselves, like the idea that they shouldn't be happening, or, oh, thought I overcame this, whatever, like they all kind of go hand in hand. And it's that opinion as opposed to the willingness to look at reality for what it is, without so many assumptions and opinions that are so familiar that those are the things more or less reinforcing yourself, the division that you perceive between yourself and what's happening, because you're everything that's happening.
Which brings me back to the idea of forgiveness, because once you recognize that nothing that is happening could ever be wrong, it's only your opinion of it that it could be wrong. There, you realize that there's nothing to forgive as well. Like you don't need to look for forgiveness. You don't even need to forgive yourself. Like all of that, the idea of forgiving yourself is coming from the idea that you did something wrong that you shouldn't have done, which is ultimately getting in the way of like freedom, really, because you're saying that you shouldn't be acting this way, but it's like, no, you did act this way, and that's okay. And there's so much to learn. There's always so much to learn. But if you're thinking, oh, I need forgiveness for that, then you're not even looking at the lesson that could be gotten from that experience. And yeah, that's so powerful. That's so powerful.
Well said. Amanda, hello.
Hi. I love this. The thought that came to me that I wrote down just in case I went on a rant on something else, because you never know. But was that you always take something from every situation, but you only take what you value. So if you value validation, that's where your attention is going to go. That's what you're going to take from that moment. But technically, you're always taking something from every single moment. It only happens to be what you value, what you think is worth taking, because there was an opportunity for growth to be taken by each of us, right? But not all of us took that. That doesn't mean that it wasn't there. It's just that, the person at the retreat that was having a difficult time just didn't value growth, but they valued validation. They valued just their feelings more than anyone else's. And so all they took from the situation was their portion of it, their experience of it. Something that I took was appreciating my growth, because I know that 5 years ago, I would have cussed him out. I would not have given him patience. I would not have been as calm. I absolutely would have been like, it's so funny that you want us to be considerate of you, and you're not being considerate of the group. That's convenient for you. Right. And I could have been just as harsh, but instead it was every time I saw him, like, hey, what's going on? Hey, how you doing, man? Breakfast is going to be done in an hour. Despite the fact that you've ignored me all morning, breakfast will be done in an hour. There will be a seat for you. There will be a place at the table for you. So if you would like to rejoin the group, please join us. That didn't happen. Isolated himself. Totally fine. Again, saw him later. Hey, how you doing? I'm making some snacks. Nothing, no response, just walked away. And then later on was coming and asking me, you know, can you tell me what happened? And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear it. And so I treated him like I would treat any child. No. No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your excuse. I don't want to hear, and that to someone else could seem cruel. That to someone else could seem harsh, because I'm not saying, oh, we all make mistakes. We're all in this together. We all mess up. You don't have to worry. No, it's that at this point, you know, being overly being comforting to you is going to be a disservice to all of us, because you're not even willing to you're not even willing to acknowledge that you impacted us. You don't control us. You're not the center of that moment, but you absolutely contributed something. You absolutely influenced the experience for everyone. And it wasn't so pleasant, because we were all, what it felt like to me was I was just furniture on his stage. Right. I'm a chair with no feelings. And he's just trying to move me around. And I'm like, I'm not, like, I am more than just a part of your set. I am a co-contributor to this moment. This moment is our moment, and you're treating it like it is just your moment to do whatever you want with it. And I'm just going to tell you no. And if you keep trying to do that, it's just no, like, stop that. I don't know what to do. Stop pretending. Stop pretending that you're the only person here, that you're the only one with feelings. Stop pretending that your feelings are the greatest, or the point of focus. Because as we were all doing that, all saying hi, all being open for 3 days, and 3 days of having somebody like lurking in the shadows, 3 days of having somebody like purposefully ignore you, purposefully stay away from you. And it's like, and I could still empathize with where he was, because I had that night where I was drunk and I did something that I was not proud of, right? So I was watching him and remembering that desperation, remembering that need for validation, that feeling. I remembered it, and I still wasn't trying to give him a pass. So I gave him space. I did not give him a pass. And all he kept coming back for was a pass. Let's just pretend that it didn't happen. And I'm like, I'm not pretending with you. You're playing this game by yourself. If you actually want to have a moment where we connect, where we talk about the moments where I feel exactly the way that you feel, where we could both learn from this, where we could both surprise ourselves with how much we can be, how much we can let go of, great. But if you're going to continue to cop out and look for an excuse, I'm not going to be that crutch for you. And I don't care how often you cry. Those are crocodile tears. You're not crying for me. You're not even crying for us. You're crying for the fact that you got caught doing something that you think is bad. That's why you're crying. You don't actually give a fuck about the group. So why should I be so gentle and patient with you? Like, you are getting more than I thought that I could give, because it was also, I'm tired. I haven't been sleeping. I have been, dealing with this. I'm dealing with somebody that doesn't want to deal, which is ironic, right? Because responsibility is the ability to deal with something. And so I'm being responsible for my contributions, and I'm being responsible with somebody who is actively not being responsible with me. And so there's only so much like kind words that I can give you. And but it also wasn't to be harsh. At no point was I saying, that someone is a piece of garbage. At no point was I saying that, I can't believe you did this and how dare you. And it was none of that. It was just, no, I'm not going to pretend with you. I don't want to hear this story. And if you don't know what to do, stop pretending that you're the only one who was impacted by your actions. So are we. And no one's trying to say that there's no coming back from that, but pretending that it didn't happen is just bullshit, because it did happen. And so what are we going to do with it now that it happened, especially because I had a firsthand experience of doing something that I wasn't proud of. And then the way that I handled it was like, and it's not that he had to do it in that way. It's just that I just didn't want to pretend that it didn't happen. And so it was like, just space. Giving space, but not giving a pass, and not being afraid that he was not going to have the greatest opinion of me. I could care less if he didn't like me in that moment, because I'm not there to make you feel better. And it goes vice versa. I never expect anybody to make me feel better because I know it's not going to be one setting. And so I don't want it to be one setting. If it was, it feels like you're just like a broken scale, that you could go from happy to angry and depressed and sad and all these things. But if you're just settling on one spot, it's just like you're a broken spectrum. But it's not broken. You just are telling yourself the story that like, oh, I'm afraid of myself. Oh, I don't know what to do. Oh, I just don't know. And it's like, well, what's happening right now? Because I know that you can feel the room. I know you can feel us. It's everybody's feeling awkward. There's almost no denying that everything shifted because we had one day at the retreat that was awesome. It was a great start. And then everything shifted after that first night. So it was like, I know that this is not just something that one person is feeling. The whole group was feeling it because the whole group was that environment. And so to pretend that the environment hasn't shifted when you can actively see that everyone is acting differently than we did just 24 hours ago, it's like that didn't just happen out of nowhere. And we could take it anywhere, because it's not like somebody made a mistake and we're just packing up their bags and hitting the eject button and shipping them out of the house within 5 minutes of that. It's that we gave someone 72 hours to talk to us, to be there with us, to grow with us. And all we got was somebody who was looking for a pass, who didn't want to acknowledge what they did and didn't want to grow from it. Like if that meant anything about him. So I'm definitely glad that it happened. And I'm curious to see how things are going to unfold because, there's been a lot of activity in the Discord post this. And so it's been interesting to see how this moment is being dragged out when we could have boxed this, wrapped this up and put this back on the fucking shelf within a day. So let's see how long this could get dragged out, because I certainly saw a lot of commitment to running, and I resonate with it. But I'm glad I was there for it, and I'm glad that we didn't let it dictate the experience of every moment, or I guess just the quality of every moment. It still felt like, despite things being like a little tense, there was still that playfulness, because we understand that we are both. And so it was really fun to kind of be feeling like a dual experience where you felt anxious, but you also were relaxed and having the time of your life, but you still felt that like that tangible tenseness that was in the background. So it was so funny to feel two conflicting things and to see it being played out in multiple people who are also feeling those conflicting things, because none of us were ever just like, hey, sunshine and rainbows, but nobody was a dark, stormy cloud. But you could feel that there was tension and relaxation. And so very, very, very unique experience for sure.
And I want to reiterate, that there's at no point throughout dealing with all of this was there, I guess, an anger towards the person that was going through it, at least not for me. And I know everybody was more or less trying to deal with it in their own way. But the fact is that, more than being, I guess, short-tempered with him or getting tired of his shit, it was just unfortunate. And to give everybody a little bit of context, basically, somebody came to this retreat with the intention of pursuing someone at the retreat in a way where they were going to be the path to happiness. And that became a sexual pursuit, and that became an aggressive sexual pursuit. And then that aggressive sexual pursuit was refused, obviously. And then there was a full 72 hours afterwards of refusing to admit that it had ever happened at all. And it was because, frankly, I don't think that person was willing to accept their own sexuality. And so after it was expressed and rejected, they spent the next 2 days denying that it ever happened because it would mean something about them. And in that denial, there was an avoidance of everybody who would have talked about what happened, which was everybody who was impacted by it at the retreat. And it's not that this person wasn't given plenty of opportunities to keep it private, to keep it to themselves, to go and cool off and come back and do. They just refused to do so ongoingly in a way that required everybody to get involved because they were all impacted. And in the following 2 days after that, there was a toddler-like avoidance of people. And when I say toddler-like, and again, I really want to express this, like, we gave this as long as we could. We really gave all of the opportunities that we could, but it got to the point where the person was hiding under their bed and locking themselves in their room. At one point, they had closed their eyes and were pretending to sleep just so they wouldn't have to deal with anybody around them. They would lurk around corners listening to the conversation. They would try and, make everyone concerned about them by expressing that they were, afraid for their well-being. It was very much like raising a toddler was, and I know this as a parent. But it was a cry for attention, and it was a cry for attention that had been given so many times previously that it was just a strategy at this point for feeling better. And because we were all aware of that, none of us were willing to cater to it. But as it was demanded over and over and over again, it did become increasingly challenging for some people, as Amanda expressed, to not just go, that's enough. Like, that's enough. But the whole point is, how often have we been there? Right? And how often how many of us have committed so much to a certain strategy of avoiding pain and suffering that we just do it unconsciously. And so there was as much understanding as we could give, but as of the last day of the retreat, it was still going on. And the person had decided, rather than come and talk to us, as we had requested, as we had offered, as we had all willingly said, we're here for you, they decided to go to the Discord where they would cherry pick the things that had happened in order to gain support and validation from the rest of the community who was in the dark. And so it was at that point that it was clear that there was going to be no responsibility, that there was going to be no accountability. And because of this complete refusal to admit anything had happened, that they could in fact recall anything happening, everybody felt that they couldn't be trusted. And rightfully so. Because everybody in that position at that point would have went, all right, yeah, I did something. I can see everybody's impacted here. Like, it would have been the easiest thing to simply accept I did something that had an impact. And there were reasons I did that thing. And I'd love to unpack those reasons, because obviously this is twisting my life. But rather than do that, they continued to box those reasons away, couldn't possibly be the reason, and continued to say, but I've done the work. I've been to therapy, as if that is a thing that's ever finished. Like, it's ever finished doing the work of who you are and why you do what you do and all of the things that have impacted in your life. There is no end to the work, right? At all. And that is the reason that upon chasing that pleasure, they continue to burn themselves, which is the reason that this episode started off with the moth and the flame. It was just the pleasure was so close, and the harder they chased it, the more they pushed everyone away. They pushed an entire house of accepting, loving, empathetic people away by demanding that those people be something else, despite the fact that those are exactly the kind of people that you would want around when you are beating yourself up and judging yourself for who you are. And yet you couldn't see it. And that is the danger. This is why you have to let go of your judgment, because as long as you're judging yourself, you can't see anybody else around you who's willing to be there to talk to you, who's willing to be there while you express what you're learning. Because you're not learning anything. You're just like, I suck, pity me, or save me. Either way, pay attention to me, because that's all I'm doing to myself. And it becomes this vicious circle. So I just wanted to add the context there, because it was a very unique experience at this retreat. And it's one that, again, I can empathize with, because I was that person once upon a time. I was afraid of the emotional ocean that we all are. I was over medicated to the point of numbing myself. So every little emotion sent me reeling. And every time it was like, this is why I can't deal with things, because I'm oversensitive. It's like, we all are. We all are. We are all oversensitive. And what we're trying to do is develop some sensitivity and at the same time courage. So that way the waves can hit us like a fucking tsunami and we're not afraid of them. We can take the torrent without needing to protect ourselves, right? And that's what maturity is. Taking everything that you are and just learning to be sensitive and non-judgmental, to accept yourself as you're going through it. Andrew.
Yeah. And in order to be able to handle those torrents, you got to be able to, swim around a bit on your own and gain a sensitivity for what they are. Because, if you're numb from it, going through torrents, you don't even realize there's torrents around, and there's an avoidance of it. And so getting out, sometimes there's a lot of torrents because they've been avoided for a very long time. But getting out gives you the opportunity to start to get a sensitivity to those things. But at the same time, as things happen, things change, we change. There's no guarantee that the environment's not going to change, right? A lot of times as we change, like the environment changes as well, whether it's in a way that we wanted it to change or a way that we didn't want it to change. Change is change. And so if there's an avoidance or a resistance to certain changes playing out because of actions that we've done, like there's going to be avoidance of the change, the entirety of the change, both in ourselves and in the environment. And so this idea that I need a certain thing or a certain situation, and the avoidance of letting it go will hinder that change as well. And the idea that, I had, came into a situation with an idea of something that was going to be a key, something that was going to be an unlock. I did something to push that away. Why do I need that key? Why do I need that unlock? And so in some whack-ass convoluted way, there's the ability to see that, that thing I was looking at to help me, be it community, be it things, be it whatever, I don't need that. And sometimes the shift in that the inability to be a part of a certain situation anymore is exactly what we need to see, to be able to see that, I don't need anything but myself, which oftentimes when that happens, when that, felt sort of connection or involvement gets cut, it's like that may be exactly what's best, because we're not here to be anyone's key. We're not here to be anyone's thing that saves them or helps them or changes them. And sometimes that environment changing, or the opportunity to be involved in something is exactly what someone needs to see, like, I can do it on my own. I can learn to swim on my own. I don't need that thing that I thought I needed, that is now, because of something that I've done, started to be pushed away.
What's that, Marie?
Very interesting conversation. Thank you for the context of what had happened. And there were thoughts that came up in terms of how it sounds like the behavior of this person was like, and how it's described as toddler like. It makes me think of like my job, because I'm like, what that sounds like is absolutely, which is why, again, I feel like I can empathize with this person to an extent, right? Like that. And so that like call for attention, as you said, and like just not a lot of, I don't even know the situation fully, so I can't really speak on it. I can only speak on what it reminded me of. And what helps me is like in the moments where I feel like a person or a student of mine is acting out in a way that isn't, not like what I don't like, but like isn't what I expected, for one, or it's just like, a little challenging, I guess. The moments where it's important, like we were talking about, like holding people accountable, like recognizing if somebody is acting in such a way that is affecting others, like, I'm still thinking of like my classroom, like we'll bring up like, hey, look up, there are like other people here, like we can't just be wrapped up in our own stuff and then totally leave out the fact that we're constantly influencing other people around us all the time. It's in those moments though, like that I work through holding people accountable, and like you said too, Ray, without that anger though, because then that feels like I'm putting in a narrative of like, well, this was wrong, and this is, it's like, it is what it is. Like going back to that conversation, it is what it is. And sometimes I feel like when people say that, it'll still be like, well, I'm still holding on to like a narrative of what I think it is, whatever that is, what it is, but maybe that wasn't really what it is. If that makes sense. Like, this is like their perception of it. And so it's in practicing when working with other people or interacting with other people that like, instead of putting my judgments of what I think other people need to be or putting labels on what people are or any of that, I try to, like, we talk about all the time, it's just like relax, pay attention. And like, then it's in those moments where I'm not holding on to anything of who I am or whatever this is, I can just be here without any of those judgments. What is happening? And then it's like in those moments that are helpful of how to navigate it from there. And I'm just like so curious about all the retreat. It makes me think too, because this weekend I thought about y'all, right? And like I was experiencing things that were making me feel a little uncomfortable, or what you were describing, Amanda, of like that tension, but that relaxation and that dualistic experience, which I think is funny. And because I was experiencing the same thing, and I'm like, wow, usually during retreats I feel like a little more relaxed. Not, once again, like I don't even know, it's not even like I'm there, but for some reason it seems to align that way. But it's funny because it still felt like it was aligned because I was a little more uncomfortable, or a new challenge presented itself where it was an opportunity for me to relax into it and see where that goes.
Likewise, for sure. It was definitely the first retreat wherein I've actually had to play bouncer, which was kind of odd. Absolutely, because there was a point where we had to separate him from the rest of the group because he was still actively pursuing. He was getting violent, is what I'm saying. And so there was a period of time where I was standing between the two of them. When we talk about toddler-like behavior, though, and I know you know this move, you know when the toddler wants attention, is not getting it, so they just lie in the middle of the floor. That happened. That actually happened. For sure. So, and this is it, is that everything you're saying is absolutely true. But imagine that with a grown person now who is physically large enough to possibly be a danger. Right. And so it added a whole other level to it, especially when they would refuse to deal with anybody. But then as soon as everybody would go to bed, they'd be up and walking around the house. And then upon finding me still awake, would go, why are you still up? Why are these people still awake? Are you going to bed soon? Why aren't you going to bed yet? Right. So there was a lot of avoidant, odd behavior that just could have been addressed at any point had they just wanted to talk about it, but it was never the case. And so at that point, it's like, okay, well, you are large enough and at a point in your life where you are responsible enough, just by virtue of being an adult, that we've given you enough chances. You have to go. And that was sad because even that was met with a refusal to deal with the situation, to the point where they just closed their eyes and pretended I wasn't there, pretended that they were asleep. So it got extreme. Absolutely. And again, no anger, no hate from any of us. If anything, as Jazz said, we all used it as an opportunity to learn about ourselves, to learn about where they were coming from, to learn about how to deal with people in a way that's compassionate, but isn't just self-soothing or soothing to them. Right. Like there were a lot of opportunities at this retreat. Absolutely. So yeah, it was an experience for sure, but one that to be honest, we kind of saw it coming. It was going to happen eventually. It was going to happen eventually because people make the mistake of thinking this is about self-improvement or enlightenment, right? Or touching God or achieving happiness and fulfillment. And they don't recognize that it's none of that. It's none of that at all. It's about being yourself, which is everything you need. Right. So yeah, it was definitely full of interesting conversations.
Certainly. And yeah, because it wasn't just that one situation. Even when things were kind of settled, there was the continuation of certain behavior of avoidance and like just uncertainty where everyone was on edge, despite that specific situation maybe playing out that night, then it's like the days following, it wasn't always just avoidance. It was like lack of communication to the point that no one really could settle upon anything and kind of had to stay on edge. And so it was an unwillingness to look at things as they were and see them for what they were, and confront them for what they are, that it continued to play out. It wasn't just that one situation either. And yeah, it was, I think, an incredible, as uncomfortable as it was, an incredible learning experience for everyone, and as impactful as any other experience we've had at a retreat. And with impactful experiences, there's the opportunity for change and growth for everyone involved. And so there that was certainly a component of it, but it was it was a great learning experience, I think, for everyone, or at least has the potential to be
ongoing, including the person that we're talking about. And I think this was the important part, is days and days and days of being around people who are giving you exactly the opportunity that you're going to wish for and have been wishing for a long time. And then to pass all of those up, it's going to stick. Part of that's going to stick, and it might result in an opportunity where later on, the next opportunity they see to actually be accountable, they're like, I'm not missing this again. Right. So I hope that it was transformative for everybody involved. And I know it was for me. Ben.
Hey guys. So yeah, this took a turn. But to just put my thoughts on it, it's like I thought of the temptation to think that this podcast is like the silver bullet to happiness and fulfillment. And this is something that I've danced with, especially when I first started listening. I was like, maybe I'll follow these guys. They seem like they got it all figured out. And part of the work is like realizing that it's not about the podcast at all. And it's about your willingness to see your own habits and behaviors. And it's just like the conversation, if you have the ears to hear, it's just going to help you with that. But if you're still giving into the habit of like putting responsibility onto the conversation, you're putting responsibility onto the podcast, you think that you're going to go to the retreat to get all of your fulfillments and desires met. No, the retreats are totally not for like getting something that is identity based out of it. It's just like a great space for you to work on your own shit, because like everyone else is doing the same. But it's definitely not a place where your egoic desires will be fulfilled, because there's accountability that we have at the retreats, and it's all about responsibility. And if you're not willing to take it in for all of your own behaviors, then you're going to be met with challenges at the retreat. And I'm sure you guys did your best. You gave all as many opportunities as you could to this person, but at the end of the day, you can only give so much, and you can run out of kindness, and then it's on them.
It's an interesting point, actually. It wasn't that we ran out of kindness. It was that we exhausted all of the other potential types of kindness until the only kindness was to force responsibility on them. That was the kindness. And this is very much the point, is that sometimes compassion doesn't seem like compassion. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for somebody is to force them to go through it on their own. And that is unfortunately the kind of kindness that I would rather avoid. But on the other hand, when it's necessary, I am more than happy to be that brick wall.
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes that is all that's left, is that because when all of the opportunities are given and they're just not willing to be looked at, then there's nothing else left on the table. So it's just what it is. It's just left with, oh, it's just me and my ability to face something or not. And that's, where free will comes down. It's like, you don't have to face something, but you're going to continue to go through the same sorts of things, avert the changes that are happening, that are playing out, that aren't always super comfortable, but the changes all go hand in hand. And oftentimes the uncomfortable changes go hand in hand with other changes that aren't as uncomfortable. But if you're avoiding the uncomfortable changes, you're going to avoid all the other potential changes that come with them. But it's going through that discomfort, not running from it, not avoiding it, not distracting yourself from it, that allows for the entirety of whatever that wave of change is to continue to play out.
Well said. We are going to wrap up here in about 3.5 minutes, but I do want to cover a few things before we do. The first one is that our 8th retreat was just completed. As we've said, we are going into our 9th retreat, which is going to be 1 year from the date that we finished our first retreat. So I'm very excited. This is coming up in the Netherlands on November 11th. Don't miss this one. It's a 9-day retreat. It's the last 9-day retreat we're going to be doing until next November. And then we've got some mini retreats coming up in February and April, and we're going camping next summer. So there's a bunch of good stuff happening. But this 9-day experience in the Netherlands is going to be just mind-blowing. Largest event we've done yet. And it's going to be filled with exactly the kind of people that we're talking about, people who are working on themselves, because this was the message we reiterated over and over and over this weekend, is that everybody here is here to be alone. Sure, we're together in that, but we're here to be alone. We're here to be solely responsible for ourselves and have the space to practice that. And so that's what these retreats are. If that's your jam, definitely join us in the Netherlands. It's going to be just incredible. And there's going to be some music. There's going to be a chef. We're going to be picking everyone up in a bus. Tickets are available right now. If you can join us on Patreon, there is a sick discount. Tier 3 Patreon supporters get $350 off. Tier 2, $150. Tier 1, $50. Speaking of Patreon, we are going to be wrapping up here shortly and continuing on a Tier 2 call. So you can join us if you'd like to. It's an hour and a half long where we chat with a number of the people that we chat with rather frequently, including almost everybody here. You can join us at patreon.com/dualistic unity. And of course, we really appreciate the support. Andrew, I'm going to pass this over to you to wrap us up for today, but I want to say thank you to everyone who could join us. I saw a few of you at the retreat, but everyone else, we missed you. It's really nice to be back. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, the retreat was incredible, and it's great to be back, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in to this episode. It's definitely a worthy exploration of this side of the conversation, because it's not the comfortable, happy, everyone's me sort of freeing sort of thing, and yet this is what informs all of that. This is like the base of everything that we are. Everything that I am is the willingness to see things for what they are on my own, in myself, without all of the assumptions about it or assumptions about myself involved. Just seeing it for what it is allows for, it's like letting down the gates to the dam and allowing things to keep on flowing. But you can't avoid looking at certain behaviors and patterns that don't necessarily match with your perspective of yourself in order for the entirety of your perspective of yourself to change. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in, and we will see some of you in 16 minutes on Patreon.
Thanks so much, everyone.